All right, here we go. Go live. Should be live. Let me type that. All right. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well. Yep,
You
we
got
are
some
live
stuff
for
to show
sure.
us.
I'm hearing
Whoops, now
ourselves a few
you
seconds
got the
later, so I'm
wrong
going to set it up now.
yeah. Your
I'm
share
just going to
screen
shut
is
them off.
literally the YouTube channel.
Yeah, I'm quitting Opera. There it goes. So
Whoa,
we're
that
live
worked
without
good.
echo. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
doing good.
yeah.
It's a always. This is kind of the highlight of my week, I think, Bill. Catching up with you, and I'm going to be honest. I feel a bit nervous about today but I see the importance of collaboration, right? When there are certain things that are good to just do on your own, and there are things where it's just really helpful to have a friend bounce an idea off. So
Right.
I figured today I wanted to ask you if you for your input and maybe the input of the group, our Discord channel. I don't want to turn this into a design by committee, but it's just good to have other ideas
Right.
sometimes.
You
When
can
I
certainly
come
do a review by committee.
Right, I come to a point where it's like I'm not really sure which way I should go about this. Is it a trade-off of spare I/O pins versus performance or certainty that something's going to work or limitations. You've done more with the ESP32 chip than I have too, so I am using an ESP32 in this, and
Okay.
I figured you would have some direct answers to some of the questions. So I
If
don't
I
know.
can
That's
remember them, yes.
that's just one thing, but you also said you've been fiddling around with the the Coral, the tensor
Yes, the
processing
tensor
unit dev.
processing unit.
So there might be an update there. What else? We've got a friend joining us today.
Yes, at 2:45 Eastern Time, 45 minutes from now, we're hoping to get the Jeffery Brace from Vintage Computer Federation to join us to talk about an upcoming swap meet and then what their plans in general are for this year for VCF, which
Sounds
I
really cool.
tend to attend just because that's where the Commodore stuff falls in as vintage.
Yeah, I love it.
So. All right. And you're going to talk about, in addition to what we're going over here, one of the things we've already uncovered is what is I2S? Well, how's it different than I2C? And what is I2C? So some good background fodder there, depending on how time. And if we still have room to talk before then, I was going to, the other day, someone asked a question about basically a clock selector on the Discord channel. And I found that I was in bed late at night and I grabbed my old data book and I did what you guys do now on the internet where you go to TI and use their product selector. I can
Hmm.
still do it with a book. And so I thought maybe I'll show that process of how I start in the front of the book, jump to the middle, and then jump to where I need to select parts. Because otherwise, how do you know to look at the entire internet for the LS line of parts? Where are they all in one spot where you can browse through them to find the part that you want? That to me is the dilemma of the internet.
It is. It's like someone said. I didn't invent this, but I just laughed when the first time I heard it several years ago. We went from the, you know, we went to the industrial age, in Victorian times, the Industrial Revolution. We went from the industrial age in the 80s, we sort of went into the information age, and now we're in the too much information age,
Yeah,
literally. And this
yeah,
this is also that you could attribute that to social media. People are hanging out their dirty laundry left, right, and center. And then some people are even hanging out dirty laundry and saying, that's not dirty, that's deliberately like that. Depending on who you are and your opinions, it's all just opinions. And then others are getting all over them and, you know,
well, you and I talked
turning
about
into
that
mass
right
mobs. But it's all about the too much information age. And
right.
I feel like that's half the dilemma now too. There's so many good products for building electronics, it's really tough sometimes to make a choice, and part of that is knowing or being able to predict which one of these is actually going to be available. Because
right.
semiconductor companies like NXP or I guess they're part of Freescale now, aren't they? Yeah.
Are they? I did not know that. I
There
mean,
was
it
a
doesn't surprise me,
vendor
but
yeah, NXP got acquired by Freescale a few years ago. Just like, but these companies, also Microchip, Atmel, TI, they don't just release
Philips.
one part, right? They release a whole family of microcontrollers with a few different variations.
Right.
And this is sensible business practice, and it costs fab money to do it, but they'll do an initial run of all of them, and whichever one gets the biggest deals, they'll just go into mass production with that one, and the others sit on the shelves waiting for a customer.
Right. Right. Or waiting to be thrown in the trash as a product line.
Right. So you might be encouraged by marketing materials to try out a certain new processor family or MPU family or FPGA family, and you'll be tempted to get early production samples, but then later on discover that's the one that didn't do so well in the marketplace, so they're basically not going to make it easily available and for someone like me, I'm not likely to need to make 1 million of something. Right.
Where you can help dictate when you make 1 million of something, you can help the vendor dictate at their priorities.
That's basically how it goes. So if you're a small business, like most electronics companies are actually not large businesses. It's like a typical sort of pyramid diagram. There's a few really gigantic organizations at the top that make mass-produced products like cell phones, and they control the market really, and it's a bit unfair, but
they control some innovation too. So
they do. I'm not like, it's just a natural thing, right? It's just it's a natural part of business. But so I don't really have a problem with it, but it just means
one of the tools to find out if a part is the part you want to use that came to mind when you were talking is like if you go to DigiKey and you're using their part selector, which can be used in place of the data books of the day. But that's the not for new design classification. You know, you can kind of get a little bit of an indication. It's not perfect, but if you go to DigiKey, so if I back up a little bit, when I select a part for small stuff, I literally, instead of looking in the manufacturer's data and then seeing if it's on DigiKey, I start on DigiKey and, with available components. Why pick a component you can't buy, in small quantity? So it's almost like going to the pantry and picking out what's available for dinner, and that's what I design with, Plus the quantities available tell you something about the part. If you're buying the first of 3 parts, or if there's 40,000 in stock, that tends to tell you what the vendor's commitment is.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good point.
So hey, we were talking about too much.
Any services that give you that kind of detail, and the part vendors like DigiKey are kind of limited to their own stock. But if you go to SnapEDA or Octopart or Fine Chips, these are all online services that give you a clearer insight as to what's going to be available. So I do use those. SnapEDA have been working on a plugin for Fusion, actually, that you can download a beta version of it from their website. There's a few things we need to build to make it more automatic to get the 3D model in, but you can look forward to seeing that sometime this year. But what it means is you can go open the SnapEDA library and place parts directly in your design from it. That's
cool.
That's gold.
And I'm still an Altium user, and in Altium you have access early in the design process to, I call them opinions of stock. There's because you go in and
Chris Gamble said it's Schrodinger's part. Until you actually go to buy it, you don't know if it's alive or dead.
Yeah, and it'll say there's 10,000 in DigiKey, and it's almost like, okay, is it also available in Arrow? Is it available in Mount? These other things, and then at the end of the day, you still need to check if you're really going to count on that part. You got to still jump out of Altium and go check yourself. Is what I recommend to people.
STM32s apparently lately have been a classic example of the part appears to be in stock when you check vendors, but then when you go to buy it, there's a problem.
Right. It's almost
I'm
like
not really
allocation.
sure.
Somebody's got
Yeah,
allocation.
exactly, and I'm not really sure. I think it's allocations that are causing it. But I did discover just last week or 2 weeks ago, there's a Chinese semiconductor manufacturer that's building parts that are almost identically numbered, the same as STM32, and I think it's under some kind of licensing agreement as a second source for STM32 drop-in replacements that are not exactly the same, but almost the same. And some of them even have additional flash memory and other options. And I discovered it because this is another project I'm working on for a kind of a conference I'm going to at the end of the month, that we have different teams of dudes and we have to have banners and things. So I'm building a banner that's basically going to have this LED matrix at the top, and I'm designing this whole frame and
Wow.
Put that together using aluminum angle and brazing and a map
Is that
torch.
PoE powering that? Is that a power supply on Ethernet connectors, or
No, this here, the power supply. This is an off-the-shelf. It's really designed to be like an 8 amp phone charger, but really it's just a buck regulator that'll take 8 to 35 volts in and give me 5 volts out at 8 amps. And
Okay.
so for this many LEDs, I need 8 amps.
Wow.
And so that's powering the controller board. And this controller board has one of these STM32 clones on it. It's called a GD32.
Now, did you do the red board, or is that off the shelf?
No, this is off the shelf. It has a GD32 doing the LED matrix control. It's got its own real-time clock and SRAM battery backed for storing the programs. And then under that, under my finger right here, it's an ESP32 with a built-in Wi-Fi antenna. And that ESP32 is just there to be a Wi-Fi connection slave. So it's kind of really could do this whole thing just with the ESP32. I don't know why they use two different micros, but
yeah, you could do it with ESP32. Yeah, it's got some gump to it.
Yeah, those are actually very powerful. So I like that I could build this whole thing just of parts I bought from AliExpress. It's awesome. And so the only thing I didn't like about this, just to tail that off, was that they're connecting to the control board. I have to load this app on my phone, and then I disconnect the phone from my home Wi-Fi.
From your home yeah. Same with my cameras.
Yep.
I have some RGB lights I bought because they looked really cool, and I could do like key lighting and stuff.
Yep.
No, you got to sit there with the phone, like you said, break it off of the SSID. You're already on, and it's totally useless to me. I'm not interested in doing that.
I'm using my old Galaxy S6 just to control the LEDs, and my regular phone is my regular phone. So
right, I don't do it anymore, but I kept extra phone, like you said, for that reason. But then because it's Apple, and yes, I'm not an Apple head, other than I use their parts, but I use their phone, but I complain about it. They're in this battle to constantly make your Apple be obsolete. And if they have to make your battery stop working, they're more than willing to do that. So there's my daily Apple rant. Sorry, everybody.
So I'm just chatting in the Discord, the part number, if anyone wants to look it up. It's a GD32. So they appear to be STM32 clones, and probably can be even development and everything can be done in all the same tool chains. So should be pretty easy. But I'm not using...
Somebody just posted that ESP32 appears to be easiest way to get Wi-Fi. I can't argue with that. It's a very quick way to get Wi-Fi.
It's flipping amazing. And Bluetooth. I haven't tried the Bluetooth stack, but by all accounts, the Bluetooth is easy too. And so that's why I'm going with that.
Mike Fikes has done, I did a little circuit for them, and he's used the Bluetooth and the Wi-Fi off of ESP32. The only complaint I have about the ESP32 is if I was going for a crypto product, I don't like the fact it's sourced from overseas, just to call it what it is.
Yeah, that's okay. You can, that's a fair enough call. You just don't know unless you built the silicon yourself.
Right.
You don't know.
You don't know what kind of backdoors are in there, and they might even say it's for production, but you don't know. Yeah.
But one way there are good ways around that, so you don't have to dismiss it fully.
Right.
I did a reference design, I think 2 years ago, for an encryption thumbstick, like a USB dongle that could store encrypted keys for software was the idea, or software licenses. If you wanted a thumb drive that was encrypted to store software license files on, for example, I designed that, and it was built around an Atmel AES chip that's got a bunch of EEPROM. It's hardened, so you can't X-ray it and see what's stored in it. Because no, seriously, that's one of the things. No, seriously,
I agree.
Right?
I did some work with unique identification, where there's chips out there that have a unique polynomial on them or a number on them, and you can't X-ray them, you can't decap them. It's in theory very, very physically difficult to read the contents, even using a lab.
So you can use your ESP32 or any micro that you're familiar with and that you can get rapid results with, which is actually a huge factor, right? If you can get something working quickly, that's a massive plus. But you can couple that over SPI bus to an AES encryption chip, and that holds your key. So for whatever, it could even, anything. But this AES 132A, I think it was called, I posted that in the Discord, is a really easy way to do that. And there's even a company I worked with or did a video with some years back in Santa Barbara called Zimbit, and they make an add-on board for Raspberry Pis that has this kind of chip on it, because they realized there's a ton of small startups that will go to market with a product that's literally just using a Raspberry Pi compute module or an off-the-shelf Raspberry Pi 3, and it's totally hackable because open source operating system.
Right.
It's and they just haven't thought through it. I believe that the Broadcom chip probably has, being designed for cell phones, probably has some security capabilities, but people generally using a Raspberry Pi don't have access to that stuff easily. So these guys built a module that just plugs into it, that even has a physical thing that you cut once you've programmed it. And then the whole system becomes completely tamper-proof. So,
and that is a whole topic. Even doing in doing FPGA design, or if you're going to build overseas, are you handing the keys to your product to the people building your product for you? Yeah. And so what we've done is run a gauntlet in the past where we send just enough code to test it. But when it gets here, we have to touch them again. We have to clean them out, do the, make them so you can't download them and load the real, and there's various ways to do it. Uploading keys that you use dynamically on the fly to decrypt your own code, things like that.
Yeah. Or there's a simple workaround, which I have with my hobby projects. I can just make them all open source, and then who cares?
Yeah. Well, I actually one time I built a tower that fit in the EEPROM burner, and all it did was swap the data lines and address lines around, so it
Oh,
looked
you
like
mentioned that, yeah.
garbage. Yeah,
Yeah,
it looked
that's
like
brilliant.
garbage. But if yeah, it kind of was, because
Yep,
and then who knew what was on the P. But at the end of the day, all it had to do was slow somebody down that was serious about it. So
that's
somebody
true.
mentioned the ESP32 was power hungry, and they mentioned Nordic in the same sentence. And that's funny because what Mike and I did was we started on the ESP32 and went to a Nordic, and did the Bluetooth, wireless LAN, and did cellular, using a Nordic part. So, and that was easy for me because I didn't do the code, right? It was Mike that had to do the code that says, okay, make it work again. So, and
Not a
and I am
problem.
not a coder, still not. Maybe someday.
I'm sure you can write all the header files and everything needed to get the basic drivers going.
I
You just
could, but
don't
I'd
like.
get a headache. Yeah, I'd have a headache when done.
So, so
Yeah,
before we
show us what
too
you got
far on,
here.
I wanted to get your advice and anyone else on who's watching, if you want to shoot a chat through in Discord or on YouTube. I'll just walk you really quickly. Let me show you the top level block diagram. So this is the essence of what I'm building here. I want a general purpose board that has everything you need to make a really slick non 3D, non video necessarily. I mean, how do I describe this? I just wanted a board that has a nice, decent, reasonable resolution TFT touchscreen with capacitive touch, an FPGA that's not a DSP sort of grade FPGA, just something that can take care of memory management and IO muxing and handling of the TFT and buffering, memory for video buffers and storage of lots of variables, data, anything you want, an ESP32 as a host, USB, and some general IO. So that's basically what I'm showing here in the block diagram. And so I haven't finished wiring everything up yet, but basically the FPGA portion is based on an ArtKit Mark X02 development board, with a couple of differences. The ArtKit only has a single 16 megabit SD RAM. I'm putting two 32 megabit or 264 megabit. I forget what they are. I wanted
Can you zoom in on one of them?
lots of memory. So all these blocks here are just the
There you
Mark
go.
X02 FPGA, right? And so it like most FPGAs, you can really program the IO however you want, but there are some sides of the die that are better for some things than others. And obviously we have JTAG. There's got to be JTAG for programming and debug.
Where'd
And
you get
these,
the library components for the FPGA?
I made them. I
Okay.
just made them in my own library in Fusion because I don't think there was an Eagle or Fusion library available for this particular part. But at the time, it was my first or second week at Autodesk in August when I made this part in the library, and I wanted to walk through the process from scratch
Right.
anyway of a big or reasonably sized part to say, what's it like to make a 144 pin QFP package
The old-fashioned
FPGA
way. Yeah.
in Fusion 360.
Right.
And in the
Right.
process, I discovered some really neat tricks, like that there's a paste special, there's pin array sort of generation tools.
I
There's
love pin array generations. Yeah, yeah.
there's a
That sets some
BSDL.
of the beefy CADs apart from some of the CADs that are tedious. Is
Right.
if you can just go bang, 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 and auto increment your address, by twos if you need to, auto increment the IO name or whatever. Yeah, there's a
Right.
lot of. So tell us
most
what
things are
what
going
banks
on.
are.
Yeah, banks. Okay, so in FPGAs, there are so many IOs, and they're all generally programmable to be whatever you want. So they're divided into banks. Often that's done. It depends on the FPGA manufacturer. That's often done based on which side of the silicon die they're on, and all the all the IOs on one bank are typically on one side of the FPGA die, in the actual silicon die, and
Right.
they tend to all share some sort
power
of
supply.
Right. They often share the same IO power supply for a bank, which is what we're seeing here. Right, these VCCs are for this bank, and that's why they're on this bank symbol, and normally they'd be decoupled together. And what that means is you can have one whole bank on a 1.8 volt supply if it's interfacing to 1.8 volt logic, which is very convenient. In my case, I'm just doing everything in the whole board at 3.3 because it simplifies everything.
Right.
As far as
You
board
can also set
like.
what kind of I/O usually on a per bank basis. If you want, if you want, I don't know if LVDS does it by a bank, but I'm pretty sure it does.
Yes, it often does, and in the case of the Mark, this is a Lattice Mark X02 and Mark X03's more recent version, and share similar things. But these, you see, this whole bank has these pins labeled with a DQ, DQ1, and DQS. Right. So this bank altogether shares some internal clocking features and what they call gears, but really that's just a rev head term for multiplexers that facilitate a DDR2 or DDR, some kind of DDR. If I were interfacing to DDR or SDR RAM, I would use this bank because it's got specific hardware for the whole bank that allows you to interface to DDR chips more easily.
Right.
Like special clocks and things like that. So.
And did you use an SDRAM library to drive an SDRAM piece of IP, intellectual property, as a controller?
So the Lattice tools have a reference design for driving or for connecting to an SDRAM, for configuring it, and then in it there's an SDRAM controller that you can generate the VHDL from within the Lattice tools, and that essentially presents to you a simple wishbone interface for your microcontroller.
Oh, they're using Wishbone. Okay, that's a pretty.
I think, actually, it's been a few months since I looked into that, but basically
something
data
like
bus,
Wishbone,
address bus, read and write. So the SDRAM, you need to go through this state machine to configure it, and you need refresh control, and you need to set up refresh cycles and timing, and if you just want to read and write as if it were a static RAM, that's painful. But so if you have SDRAM and you have the equivalent of a 6502, which is just basic address bus, data bus, read and write control.
Right.
How do you interface to an SDRAM? You need something like an SDRAM controller in an FPGA, and that's the whole point of having this Lattice part in here. Is it's designed specifically to be the part that does that kind of thing, and that will interface to the TFT panel, and I can set up double buffering for video, and I can have memory for whatever I want. And then the host controller, so that second page is I'm clicking on the Skype call and not the actual thing. So I've got some SPI flash for long-term storage. I'm debating whether or not to find room on the board for an SD card slot.
Do you use the SPI flash to also program the FPGA, or is this a completely separate SPI?
It doesn't need to be, because the Lattice Mark XO is flash based. But it is an FPGA, but it has its own internal flash, I believe, for configuration. So it's instant.
So how are you programming it? Do you have a JTAG type connector, and you just program it once on a standalone type basis?
So this brings me to the page where I wanted to start asking for some input.
Okay.
So yes, I have an FTDI universal JTAG interface. This is the most common and straightforward and guaranteed to work. It's how most FPGA development boards do it now, and how pretty much any off-the-shelf JTAG debug adapter will use this chip because it's just so easy. Chips are a little expensive, I've got to be honest. FTDI, they know they're popular, so their chips are very expensive.
They know they're popular, and they know they're being cloned and scalped. Yeah.
So, so I have the FTDI FT2232 for JTAG and serial. That's the cool thing. It's a dual device, so I can have a virtual COM port as well, and that's needed because whatever my design is, we'll be using a virtual COM port to communicate with a host probably anyway. And then, so that's the first question. So the nature of JTAG is you can daisy chain multiple devices. So I can connect, at the moment, what I've got is the JTAG going straight to the FPGA for configuration and debug of the FPGA code. But the ESP32 can also be debugged using JTAG. So I can put the FPGA and the ESP32 together in one JTAG chain, but I'm not sure, and I wanted to ask you if you've done this before, and if any of the ESP32 development tool chains have a problem debugging when you've inserted an FPGA into the chain along with the ESP32. Now, in theory, as long as you load up the BSDL files, so these are the files that describe how long the JTAG chain is and what all the IOs are connected to it for a device. As long as you load that into whatever software you're using, it should be able to still debug and ignore the other device. But
I've not seen where the software knows what BSDL is. BSDL is.
I've never seen GNU debugger or the GDB tool in the tool chains used with ESP32 or even other microcontrollers where there's also an FPGA in there, and how they react to that and how you tell it which device is the one you're trying to actually talk to.
Right. Now, I'll say that when I've used JTAG, I've usually broken it out as a separate function, and I've never mixed vendors. For example, if I'm chaining Altera, I chain Altera, and the tool knows all about chaining Altera. The trick with JTAG, though, was it's a honking interface sometimes. You need like 2K pull downs, and you've got to have a termination resistor. It's a high-speed bus, and it needs to be treated like a high-speed bus.
And the more devices you insert into it, because it's daisy chained, the more devices you insert, the more latency there is in the whole system. Because it's
for the data,
it's a great big long shift register. Each device is a shift register, and that's
with a common clock.
You've got a JTAG input and a JTAG output, and that goes to the next device. And if the timing inside the device doesn't match the JTAG clock, so that's another problem. Some ARM microcontrollers have to use a return T clock to tell the debugger. And one thing I like about FPGAs and I like about the ESP32 is they don't need a return T clock. They'll work rigidly to the JTAG T clock. So as long as you have good signal integrity on your board, you shouldn't have a problem. So you're recommending, and it's kind of my hunch, and I think I'm going to go this route, is to multiplex the JTAG chain and switch between FPGA and ESP32. And
you know that'll work. Let's put it that way. If you have and for the cost of a connector or even just the pads, you have one for each. But you could then try jumpers to see if it, without committing your PC board, you could gang them together and see if that works. It would be my thought.
Maybe I'll try it with an ESP room module, and I've got a Mark XO breakout board that I got from Lattice, so I should really just hook it up on a breadboard or with wires and JTAG them together and see what I can do. I'll do it that way, and then I'll let that, if that works just with flying wires, which is terrible signal integrity, I'll know it'll work.
But if it works with flying wires, it should work when laid out well. Not but it's the first indication it may work on your PC board.
Yeah.
Things can work accidentally. I tell this to people. if the one on the bench works, that's almost bad news, because that means that you won't go in and debug it and find out that you have like an inverted clock or a race condition or something like that.
Yeah. So that was one question. I feel like I've got a good path forward to answer that at least. The serial interface, I was thinking, so one of the tricks I could do is run all of this into the FPGA, and then when I program the FPGA, I can configure it to go through the FPGA, use a part of the FPGA as a mux, and then connect all the debug and other serial interface lines to the ESP32 via the FPGA. And that way, there's more work to do to make that happen in the FPGA, but it's not complicated. It's just a couple of multiplexers. But it gives me flexibility to, either connect through to the ESP or connect to something else inside the FPGA. Because this FPGA I'm putting on the board is big enough to also have its own Miko 32 microcontroller in it if I wanted to, right?
Right. And that's cool about FPGAs is I used to use the Altera NIOS. I was always dropping a NIOS processor in there. And you can select for, do I want a simple NIOS? Do I want a high performance NIOS? I don't think you can change the bus width. But I used to tailor the NIOS to one of 3 models, small, medium, and large, and get it to work the way I wanted it to. You mentioned the Wishbone bus, which is it virtualizes some of this for us.
It does. It takes care of all the handshaking and makes it real simple architecture, just like
right.
And I was looking many years ago when I started learning about Wishbone and using it in FPGAs. I was starting to think, hey, Wishbone could work on a printed circuit board between FPGAs as well. You could have a Wishbone bus go outside the FPGAs on a bunch of pins. It would take up a lot of pins if you did it in parallel, across to another FPGA, and that way you could have your design partitioned. If you had a really big design that wouldn't fit, like it might be cheaper to buy 2 Cyclone 4 FPGAs and partition your design and use up a bit more board space than it would be to use a single really large Cyclone or maybe a Stratix or something. That's the higher end, bigger silicon. They may cost a lot more because the silicon yields are harder to get with a larger die size, right?
So, and less per wafer. Yeah, less dies per wafer.
Yeah, so if you can partition your design, I started looking into it, but never actually tried it. Something else we should probably do one of these days. Yeah.
So I used to by the way, a source of good components on the Wishbone bus is opencores.org. You can get, for example, many different 6502s. And the way you can make them talk to other things is the other things speak Wishbone too. But if in the Altera world, we had another bus called the Avalon bus. And guess what? It's the Wishbone bus with like 3 wires changed, right? So you go in and you reassign how those wires, it's like the way the read and write strobes work and stuff. And with just a mild change, you can make Avalon, everything, that Altera produced for Avalon can work on the Wishbone bus. And I've done that. I made a full vision system on a little 2-inch board that I've lost. I hope it's over there, but I haven't been able to find it. And it was a NIOS processor, and I used Wishbone and Avalon bus interchangeably on the die, or on the FPGA font.
Hey Ted, you wrote a comment. You wrote a comment in the chat not to forget decoupling caps. That's a good.
Yes, and Microcore Labs asked about that. There you go. This is how we do it.
I still need to add a few more. I'll probably separate them out from the other sheets because I added them in around the other devices, but put them.
Now, how did you select your decoupling caps? Did you do the fancy way or the simple way of going with 0.1s and decading them?
Decading is not always a good practice.
Not always, but it'll work for a small quantity, right?
But no, I tend to follow what's already been done in known good designs. So So as one example, I mentioned the ArtKit Mark X02 development board, and I also read the decoupling application note for Mark X02 devices from Lattice. So for FPGAs, you should probably, there are people in the PCB design world who shun FPGA application notes, saying they're always way overkill and not scientifically done, and they're based on rules of thumb, and you end up with 500 more caps on your board than what you really need. And look,
which in low quantities is sometimes okay.
I think it's a case of they're trying to err on the side of caution, and I will follow that. But if I discover, because my design here is meant to be general purpose in nature, and it will depend on what's programmed into the chips, what their power requirements will be, how much signaling, sags there, or current sudden current requirements may be required.
Right.
So I'm gonna go with what the manufacturer Lattice recommends and what the development board had on it, which matches the manufacturer data sheet.
Which isn't always right, but sometimes good enough. And how about ferrite beads? Do you still see ferrite beads in series with like the analog voltage? And it's like, wait a minute, they resist the change of current. How's that helpful for the current supply needs of an FPGA when it wants an instantaneous amount of current?
Yeah, I feel like ferrite beads are often a sign of someone who doesn't really know what they're doing.
Or the spec sheet, they're on a lot of spec sheets.
They are, but they're also a sign that someone knew that there were EMI issues, and it's and you don't put the ferrite bead between the cap and the chip. You put it between the cap and chip and everything else.
Right.
And in
but
that
it's
case,
still, that means that your decoupling cap can truly decouple that inductance, and that's where the word comes from. It decouples its supply inductance and provides a local source of current. But what
ferrite beads do is slow things down. That's the bottom line. That's what you're getting at.
They resist.
Sometimes we discussed this before. Sometimes your clock speed is not fast. The actual operational speed of your circuit is not fast, but the chips you're using have very fast edges, and those create noise. And that's where the ferrite beads can be helpful.
It's like putting bad gas in your car and getting less smog because you go less far.
Yeah.
It's like let it go as fast as it needs to, and then deal with the true EMI issues is what to do in larger production.
Right.
Hey, so guess what time it is?
Layout, yeah, it's 11:45. I was going to say we're just about to be joined by our special guest, Jeff. I guess we didn't get to my questions about I2C or SPI,
but you know what? That's great for next week.
That's good for another episode. So we'll come back to that, and by then I'll have probably done a bit more component placement as well, so you can all get a feel for what this thing's going to look like in the end.
And while you were talking, I put up one of my FPGA boards, and if we ever get to talking about people that want to learn FPGAs, I'd love to have that conversation for somebody wanting to learn FPGAs.
Yeah, totally. Here's Jeff.
Welcome, Jeff. Let's try and call Jeff. Let me see if I can do this.
He's on.
Oh, now
he's on. He joined.
He did. Okay. So now let me find him to bring him up on the
NDI stream.
Yes. So I'm going to make my picture smaller so nobody has to stare at my head while I do this. Because I don't have good depth of field anymore because I am old. And hopefully he's live, Jark.
I don't know if you want to.
Hey, he is live, Jark. Don't do that to me. He didn't say Jeff. Hi, Jeff. Can you hear us? Hang on. Let me get rid of your echo.
Yes. Now, Bill, you're too small.
And now, now I'm going to make me large that I'm not sticking my head right in the camera. How you doing, my friend?
Good. How are you? It was great to see you last night at the TPUG meeting.
Wait, tell us what TPUG is.
So TPUG is the Toronto Pet Users Group. Basically, they are the guys that are still running the World of Commodore events. They meet in Toronto, but since COVID, they've been doing Zoom calls. So I've never been able to actually go to their show, but now with Zoom, I've been going to their meetings. They have it once a month on the third Thursday at 7 p.m. So I'm glad to
Eastern.
be able to start meeting these guys because I've always wanted to go to that show. So they're a great group of guys up there in Canada. I know a few of
And
them
gals,
personally.
yep.
So they it was great to see you there, and everyone appreciated you coming there.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had fun, right? As I told everybody that I was there on the meeting and suddenly heard the whoosh of water in a part of my house that's not supposed to have the whoosh of water sound. So I had to leave early and deal with a home issue. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. I was at the TPUG probably about 4 years ago now, and it's just a great group of people, as you mentioned. I had an excellent time, and they made me feel really at home. And what was interesting is when I went through airport security and then hit customs, the guy's like, "Why are you here?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm for a group." And he's like, "Have you ever heard of the pet?" I'm like, "I'm actually going to the TPUG. How do you know about the pet?" Well, of course, these customs guys are supposed to know stuff like that, right? Try and trip you up. And he's like, "So, are they paying you?" And I almost joked if a T-shirt counts, but I didn't want to start a whole conversation about whether I expected a free T-shirt or not. With the customs guy. So I just went.
Customs is pretty strict on that one.
Yeah. Don't joke with customs. More than time of day jokes, right? So yeah, that was cool. Thank you for inviting me to that, Jeff. But you're here to talk about another event too.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
So Vintage Computer, I'm with in case you guys didn't know, I'm with the Vintage Computer Federation.
Yeah, tell us about yourself and then the event.
So I originally got involved with this group back in 2008. I was, in a job where I didn't really get to travel or have much vacation time. So I was always hoping to go to, World of Commodore or VCF Midwest or Convex or, any of the other shows. And so I looked up online and I found this Vintage Computer Festival. So in 2008, I showed up. I enjoyed the show, and since I live locally, only about 7 minutes away, I started volunteering.
Cool.
And then, eventually I was helping out so much, then I became, involved with management and organizing the events. We started out as like a sort of homebrew type of group, and now we're like this 501c3, and we have VCF West.
Explain 501(c)(3). That used to be like the banner on your website. It's changed. The website doesn't say that right in your face anymore, but what is that?
501c3 is basically a non-profit organization, charity. So we're not for profits.
So I can donate money to you, and it's a tax write-off.
Yeah, so you can donate money, and it's a tax write-off, exactly.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So, people have asked how I'm related to you guys, and my answer is I volunteer for you guys because that's how I look at the time I put in, and whatnot. It's a volunteer job, and it's a blast.
Yeah, when it's great that you're so local enough that you can come to our events, VCF East, and we're happy to have you there. You're always great to have you there speaking and just hanging out, It's really nice that you can do that.
Right.
A lot of guys
what got my interest in VCF is I looked you guys up when the web first became the web, and it was plastered with pictures of Wozniak. I'm like, where's the pictures of Commodore? I don't, just Commodore in general. Where there's Apple doesn't, Apple isn't all retro was the way I looked at it, and that changed pretty quick. But I'm talking 12 years ago, 14 years ago when I originally saw VCF's website.
Oh yeah. Well, one of the founders, he was very much of an Apple enthusiast.
Probably.
So that's probably why that.
And that's allowed. It's like religion. Everybody's got one, right?
Yeah.
But I think there's a subtle message there too that, what has Apple become? It certainly ain't what it started out as. And the Apple II represents people like us who want to get our hands and fingers into the guts of the machine. And I think that's a huge reason why vintage computing has such a resurgence and is such a popular hobby, because modern systems don't let you really know what's going on. And back then, to write any software, you were learning assembler if you wanted any kind of performance.
Right.
And you were bumming lines of code trying to figure out how, and getting excited when you discovered an undocumented instruction, like what the Z80 and the 6502 both had some interesting undocumented instructions. And this
Halt and Catch Fire is originally a 6502 instruction. It's used to name a TV show that has nothing to do with 6502s, but we had a halt and catch fire instruction in the 80s. Yeah.
So if you want to ask someone who's into computing what's von Neumann versus Harvard architecture, most software guys wouldn't be able to answer that question, even though it's a really fundamental thing, right? But anyone who's been into retro computing knows that kind of stuff. Knows the key. So it's, hey, I just really wanted to quickly say to Dave Adams' mother-in-law, Herlinda, hello. Just proving that this is actually a live show and their chat is interactive.
Prove that you're live and not a simulation.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah.
Invite your friends who are into retro computing and electronics, by the way.
So, one thing I'll say about the Apple II was it was an open. It did look like you can get in and make your own boards and get in and probe around and stuff. But at the same time, they were never going to be able to make something as cheaply as we could because we were closed. We were just a PC board with as much crap crammed on it as you could cheaply. And their roots were the computer groups. That's where the Apple evolved at, is my understanding. The Apple
the homebrew club. Yeah.
Homebrew, that was it. Yeah. So hey,
but something I loved about Commodore though, like even when it changed years later and became basically the Amiga company, but even with Amiga manuals, you got schematics at least. So,
yeah. I just one of the windows I had to close here was off of Zimmer's, where I was looking at one of my own schematics from the old days. I used Zimmers.net to find these on. So, hey Jeff, you have an event coming up this weekend. Is that true, or next weekend?
It's the following weekend. So it's April 24th, and it's going to go from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. We're running a swap meet. We had moved our VCF East from April to October, so we decided to do a swap meet in April. This is our second one that we're doing. The first one was in November. It was great. We didn't know what to expect. We had a decent turnout of like 20 vendors and maybe 100 buyers, and now it turns to be at least there's double, maybe triple that number. There's a lot of people just itching to get out, itching to buy, itching to sell. Just because of COVID, they want to go and meet each other, and so it's outdoors, so it's a lot safer. So this time we're also inviting the ham radio guys and just the radio, regular radios, TV, related technologies. So it's a big open parking space. It's going to be in Wall, New Jersey. It's going to be right next to InfoAge Science Museum. That's where the VCF Museum is. And it's going to be great.
Is there a rain date?
So the rain date is going to be the following day, April 25th. And I keep checking the weather. It's still like 8 days out or so. But yeah, the rain date is the next day, the following day. Yeah, that's hopefully it's good weather. So
for people that haven't attended a regular VCF, I'll tell you that it was always rain or shine, and it always rained.
Well, I just remember this one year. It was like, because we originally was a 2-day festival, and then we added a Friday, which is like a university where basically just the core members are teaching each other like how to fix hard
And that's
drive
where I
or-
usually show up, is a Friday.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was one Friday where it was just downpouring rain the whole day. It was just really horrible, but it's still fun. So again, we're scheduled for that East on October 8th, 9th, and 10th. Our theme this time there's two themes, and this is what pattern that I want to keep going with, a hardware and a software one. So the hardware one is the IBM PC and its legacy, because that's the anniversary of the IBM PC, and it
Right.
does have a long-term effect in PCs, from that time onward. And the second one is Text Adventures. So that's going to be the software one. So one of the big names for the Text Adventures is Scott Adams, not the cartoonist,
Not the
but
cartoonist.
the video game designer. He had created a text adventure that he called Adventureland, which was based on Colossal Cave Adventure.
Adventure, right.
Yes, it was
Written in
one of the-
Fortran originally, right?
I think so. It was like on a very early computer system. I think a PDP.
We had a Fortran copy of it. Let me say that then. That was the language that we originally got it in, and we put it on a VAX, an LSI 1123. So, yeah.
And we're going to have Bill Minch. We had done a virtual show, which was, awesome. Despite it being virtual, we had ours in October, and Bill Minch was there. Now I can actually meet him in person. He was one of the 8 people that created the 6502 chip. So he's going to be there. That's really
This weekend on the 24th, or is he going to be there this October?
He's going to be in October. He'll be here.
Okay. So to kind of back up a little bit, you've got an event in 2 weeks, and then you've got your VCF. You've moved to October, hoping to have more of an open event.
Yes.
Okay. And is that event going to be hybrid?
Bill,
Go ahead.
I'm just thinking, Bill, we probably should make this a staple of the announcements channel on Discord too. I'm just thinking there's got to be similar events somewhere in Europe and
Joe
here on the
Bishko said
West
Fortran
Coast.
4.
Here on the West Coast. So I know VCF have a West Coast presence and have events here too, which I was going to ask you about, Jeff. But we should probably post this information on the Discord as well.
Should we have a channel called not announcements but calendar, or are we just too many channels at that point?
Yeah, or we could put it on CoriolisEffect.com if that's a better sort of format.
If there's a way to do that, yeah.
Yeah, we'll follow up on that later though. Just wanted to put a pin in it.
So tell us about the VCF West then, since Ben asked about it. When is that event, and what kind of event is that going to be, and where?
So the VCF West is scheduled for August 7th and 8th. We're going to have it at the Computer History Museum. Now, that's contingent on them reopening the museum. They're expecting to reopen in July, and the event is, again, August 7th and 8th. We're trying to expand what we can do there, because we had like a few rooms in the big main room, but not the sort of theater. So we're trying to get the whole second floor this time. So we'll see what happens with that. And so now we're in the early stages of trying to get speakers and everything like that. So we really hope it's going to happen. Eric Klein, the president of VCF, he runs that show. But we, Corey Cohen and I, we go there and support him. We fly to California and help him out. It's a great museum there.
That's right. I stood right next to you talking with Leonard Trammell, and never thought to introduce you. And Leonard's from the area, right?
Yeah.
And it just never dawned on me, because you were so busy. It's you guys, when you say you worked that weekend, you worked that weekend. You were at those tables continuously.
Yeah, because the consignment area is very busy. People love buying and selling that stuff, and We had different talks and exhibits. It is very busy for us. It's really kind of like work. So sometimes I have to like break away. It's like, I want to at least look at this museum. I'm already way over here,
Right. Yeah, and Leonard gives a great tour of the museum. I'll introduce you and then ask him for a tour, if provided we can get downstairs. He seems to be able to go wherever he needs to go in the museum. They know who he is, so he gave us a guided tour of the place. So I'm real happy to hear that the auditorium, though, is opening up, because, I've spoken in the main room, and the background noise was kind of an issue for us. So going to the auditorium, that'd be a great venue. I've been on that stage, and that's a great stage to be on.
Yeah, we're definitely hoping for that. Eric is working on that, trying to really push for that, because that would be helpful. And when there's no talks, then we'll just run different videos of different things, vintage related.
I think I even used the phrase, I'd be willing to donate money to help you guys get that big stage as part of your venue, because I assume it's a cash issue there.
Right now, I think it's more of a logistics issue, because the person that was sort of coordinating at CHM is no longer there. We had made the agreement with her, and now it's with somebody else. So we're not sure if that agreement had transferred, because we originally promised the second floor, but now that it's with someone else, there might not have been the paperwork there to transfer. So that's the issue. Maybe somebody else was going to use it. So we just got to try to push and say, yeah, come on, let us use it, please. We're a very successful show. We bring in a lot of people.
That's another good reason. If people still need to socially distance by then, even if it's a reduced amount, like my kids are only 3 feet apart in school now, so hopefully by then it won't be necessary at all. But with more people, you just have to have more space. How else do you do it?
Yeah, exactly.
Go to the car park. So.
And it's a great room for spacing out in, versus when we're in the main room, we're seated like concert seating.
Yeah.
So excellent. So Ben, what was your first retro computer? Or have you ever dinked with one?
In college in 1994, I did my first microcomputers class, studying electrical engineering at the associate level. We had this teacher, Dennis Fox, and David. These two guys, Dennis Fox and David. Don't remember his name. Oh my gosh, I wish I could, because he's worth a mention. He was a good teacher. They did a 65CO2 board. So in Australia, we had wanted to clone the Kim one, but they couldn't get them, or it was too expensive to have them shipped from America at the time. So the college designed their own clone of a Kim one called the ZIM.
Okay.
ZXYM, the ZIM one. And we used those in the lab, and they wrote their own ROM monitor and they wrote entirely from scratch, their own assembler and debug and ROM monitor. And then we had to build our own miniature version of it on our own PCB and wire wrap some of it to learn how to do address decoding and all that stuff. So they deliberately left some of the board undesigned.
Right. Breadboard area type thing.
Just with wire wrap positions for a 74LS138 and 00, some glue logic and the clock. And we had to finish the wiring for the addressing and everything. And I still have it, and it still boots up and gives me a prompt at the serial port prompt. But I've long since lost the assembler and debugger software that should go with it. So I don't know what I'll do about it, but
I bought the connector to power up my Kim 1, and then I promptly lost both the Kim 1 and the connector. They're around here somewhere, but I don't know what box they're in.
Yeah, so that's my probably oldest tech. A friend of mine had this really old single sort of built-in Z80 computer terminal that had a white phosphor display. And I did my first ever hand assembly using that for a Z80, or Z80 we call them.
Right.
Countries of the Commonwealth with the Queen's English. And
Canada, yes.
Yeah, so to do that, it was a basic OS system, so I had to use peeks and pokes. So hand assembled to binary coded decimal
Right.
from a Z80 instruction set, section of the data sheet from Zilog, and then from there write a basic program that peaked it and then jumped to that location, and it worked.
Okay.
And
Right.
it took hours and hours and hours, and I was super
Yes.
satisfied
Yeah. To
at the
poke
end.
it all in. Yeah. And the company I worked at before Commodore did its development on a Kim, and they would timeshare to do the compilation. They would timeshare on a 7500 baud modem, and inevitably, and we had a teletype, and we would use the tape as media. And inevitably, while the tape's running and everything, a secretary would pick up the line to see why it's been off hook for 2 hours and ruin the compilation. But that's how we did it. We did it on tape and hand typed it in and stuff. So, what's one of your first
sharing phone
retros,
lines
Jeff?
with other people is always a pain. Sorry.
Yeah, well, I used to be an ISP, so yeah, we had to tell people get 2 phone lines if they wanted us to help them troubleshoot their connection. So, Jeff, what was your first? Do you have any retros, or do you just do this as a VCF type thing? And do you, in effect, you curate a large collection by virtue of your position?
Yeah. So, for me, well, the first computer that I ever used was Apple IIe. In middle school, we did like the little turtle logo graphics.
Yeah.
And then in high school was I didn't even know some sort of mini computer, but that's where I learned to type. Now I'm just like one of the nice skills to have is to be a touch typist. But then I got when I was 13, the summer of 13, my brother's friend, he had a computer. And he was selling it. It was used. So it was like I could get an Apple, which was like $1,000, $1,200, and or I could get my brother's friend's computer, Commodore 64, monitor, disk drive, printer, floppy disk full of games, $150. And I was like, yeah, I'll get that. My father's like, I'll help you pay for it. So I got that. It was my first home computer.
What cool.
The first year, all I did was play games.
Oh yeah,
of course. Ghosts and Goblins.
And then I open up I was like, well, can I do more with this? And so I open up the user guide and start typing in the basic programs and trying those out. And
the user guide was 2.5, 3 inches thick of just how to use your Commodore. It was one of the amazing things to me about Commodore 64 was the book that came with it. I felt.
Yeah, and then I eventually got the programmer's reference guide, and
that's the one I'm thinking of. I'm sorry, you had to buy it, but it was
that's the thicker one. It was like $20, and my mother knew she cleaned for some guy who was like also a Commodore fan. He had a 64, he had a 128, he had a plus floor, and then I found out about a user group. That was like fun. It was like go to user group meetings, you find out like different demos and things like that, and he lent me the magazines, Compute Gazette, and things like that. And so from there, that's where continue working on it. It was fun.
Right. So we're coming up almost 9 minutes past the hour here. Any comments other than I would say Jeff hit us with those dates again, and Wes will be at your swap meet. It looks like one of our members who I know from being in Jersey here. So
nice.
Got you one at least.
The swap meet is April 24th, and the rain date is April 25th. VCF East is October 8th, 9th, and 10th. VCF West is August 7th and 8th. You can go to our website, vcfed.org, for all the information.
Okay, cool. And I'm working on getting you an old Commodore person other than me, Andy Finkel. I'm working on him. So hopefully we'll get you somebody that was there throughout the entire Commodore arc and can speak of everything from the PET to the Amiga. I only know the stuff in the middle, but he knows both ends of it. So he was like one of our sages, and he knew where the bodies were buried, so to speak.
I
Literally.
love it.
That would be wonderful. Yes.
I can ask,
Excellent.
has anyone reverse engineered or made an FPGA implementation of Agnes.
Hmm.
Because Agnes to us was some like magical wizard holy grail chip, I'll tell you.
I don't know. But
Yeah.
Amiga Bill is into the Amigas. Maybe he would probably know that. That would be a person I would ask.
Right. Yeah, I don't know, and we called it Fat Agnes, the version we made, because I think the die just got big, But and somebody actually posted a picture I just saw today, and on there you can see on the board it says Fat Agnes right on the PC board.
Yeah, it said that in the schematic. That's right, it did, as I recall. Yeah.
Right, and that was basically when CBM took over the design of Agnes from Atari. That's where the fat transition occurred, is my memory. I could be wrong, but
that's
it was
where
so
the
long
silicon
ago.
got bloated. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it kind of did. We had to blow the bounds of the die. Yeah.
I'll tell you what,
it's my
though,
memory.
that Amiga 500 was a revolutionary machine.
By the
everyone I
way,
knew wanted one.
somebody joined us on the Discord. I want to give a shout out to Joe Mishko, who ran our Vaxes for us back at Commodore, and just one of the nicest guys you'd ever met. And what I liked most about Joe was he laughed at my jokes. So, hey, Joe, glad to see you there, man. It's been 35 years, dude. So, very cool. Hey, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jeff, for joining. Ben, as always, good to see you. And, you know, Ben, I think let's talk more about your schematic next week, because as you said, we didn't really get through it, but that's what happens on these shows. And
that's cool, man. That's what it's all about. And I've got some more advice to move on with my design and progress further with it. So we'll see how we go.
Cool.
I'll have more done. Yeah, JTAGedness. I'm going to multiplex it. Yep.
So, and thank you everybody that watched and then gave comments on YouTube and Discord. We have a Discord channel. Go to Coriolis Effect. I almost said Coriolis.com. CoriolisEffect.com with a hyphen in the middle, and there's a Discord invite. And I'll try and dump the Discord invite on the YouTube chat again here before we're done. So, excellent. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next week.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Jeff. See you.
All right.